Our next guest is with the National Shooting Sports Foundation, or the NSSF 8. I don't know where the 8 came from, but he joins us now. But he goes by the name of Larry Keane. What's going on, Larry?
Good. How are you? Nice to be with you.
Doing really good. I don't know, for some weird reason, that 8 just kind of rolled off the tongue really nicely. I think you guys should consider changing your acronym.
NSSF 357 or something.
So tell us about this government change from the State Department to the Department of Commerce.
So there's an initiative that's been going on for a number of years called the Export Control Reform Initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really driven by former Secretary of Defense Gates and General Jones, who was then the National Security Advisor, to take a look at our country's export control regime, the export of products, and how it gets licensed for export, so that because the system that was been in place is really a Cold War era system. It doesn't make any sense in today's world, and it's anti-competitive, and it actually hinders U.S. national security, as well as it creates barriers to creating jobs through the export of products. So what's gone on over the last 8 years or so is that they've taken products and moved them from the State Department to the Commerce Department for export licensing, which is a much more business-friendly licensing situation.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea, as Gates said, was to have the State Department have a higher fence around a smaller yard and have the State Department focus on those military items that give our warfighters a competitive advantage in the battlefield, and not to license things like, for example, single-shot, bolt-action, 22 caliber rimfire rifles that you would use in a Boy Scout camp to get a merit badge. But those are that's exactly what's licensed by the State Department currently. And so while there are 21 categories that the State Department licenses,
mm-hmm.
18 to 21 have already transitioned where dual use or commercial products have moved over to Commerce Department, except for firearms and ammunition products, which the Obama administration singled out and refused to transfer, even though the policy would say that you should move them. And even though, in talking to people both at state and in commerce over the years, the proposed rules were there, they were prepared, they were ready to be published. But because of the Newtown tragedy, they were shelved, and they refused to move them. So we're trying to get that moved now. It landed on the desk of Susan Rice, as I understand it, who basically agreed it was good policy, it made sense,
mm-hmm.
except optics were bad because of gun control politics. And so our industry was singled out for special treatment. And so now we've got a letter recently from 29 senators, including 6 Democrats and an independent, Angus King from Maine, and a House letter with 145 members of the House, with many Democrats. That's about a third of each chamber. It calls upon the Trump administration to move forward with completing the export control reform and to move the licensing of sporting and commercial firearms from the State Department to the Commerce Department, so that our industry isn't singled out. It's really to undo a anti-gun decision by the prior administration.
You know, it's interesting. You know, it's stuff like this happens behind the scenes all the time, and you know, and it's so easy for them then to get up and stand up there and say, "Oh no, we're for the Second Amendment," but right. Yet everything below the surface, you know, it's kind of like, you know, the duck analogy, you know, above the water, everything's cool, calm, and collected, and then beneath it, it's just chaos. And I look at gun grabbers doing the same thing. You know, they present this face of, you know, just reasonableness, you know, a respecter of the Second Amendment. We just want to tame the Second Amendment just a bit when
common sense. Tested. I mean, in the case of the export control, the rules were drafted to do this back as early as 2011 to early 2012.
Uh-huh.
And they kept delaying it, and then after the Newtown tragedy, they put them on a shelf, and there they sat. And then they gave lip service to Congress that they were going to do it at the end of the administration. And oh, by golly, they just ran out of time. And so left us as the only categories that weren't to benefit from the export control reform regime, which would be substantial. Among the other problems this would solve is, for example, gunsmiths wouldn't have to register with the State Department and pay an annual fee of $2,250, even though they're not exporting anything, they're not taxing or burdening the export control system.
Yeah.
So, which is what's required under the law.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting how there's almost this, I call it the negative trickle-down effect with respect to laws like this, because they do end up hurting the smaller people. They end up hurting the hobbyists. They end up hurting the people who just literally want to fix guns. And
so if you, even as an individual, were to drill, your firearm in order to mount a scope, you are now engaged, as far as the State Department is concerned, in manufacturing, which triggers the requirement that you, as an individual, have to register with the federal government and pay this annual fee of $2,250, which is ludicrous. So that's an example of one of the problems that would be solved by the export control reform taking place with respect to our products. So we're hopeful and optimistic that with support of many members of Congress, again, a third of both the Senate and the House on the letter, and there are many more that would have supported it and do support it that just didn't get around to signing on to the letter, we can get the administration to pardon the pun, pull the trigger, and finally get these rules published so that we can see the benefit of the export control reform, which will help the industry to create jobs, pay more taxes, and will actually strengthen national security.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So really quickly, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll do some more talking with Larry.